Welcome to Noise 11, Angry Anderson, and it's great to talk to you, Angry, in a sort of a different capacity. Normally it's Rose Tattoo. We're talking about the Angry Anderson Band, so I'll need you to define
Yes.
who the Angry Anderson Band is for me first.
Some years ago, when we resurrected a new lineup for the Tats, it was under the management of Scotty Crawford, and one of his other bands. He's got a stable. One of his other bands was a band called Palace of the King from Melbourne, and they started doing opening spots for the Tats, particularly in pubs, and an extremely talented bunch of young musicians. So I was enamoured by their not only their musicality, I mean but more their style. They've got a very 70s flavour. The song that now has become Realise Legalise was the result of an afternoon of just jamming, just ourselves and a few other well-known Melbourne musicians all got together in the studio to knock around some ideas. And
So in 2022, you're reactivating Rose Tattoo. Are you going to be having parallel bands and taking the Angry Anderson / Palace of the King out and doing one tour, and then the other tour with Rose Tattoo, which is also an American tour? So, that's obviously quite a commitment for 2022 for you already.
There's quite a few tours going out in America, etc., etc. But they're not letting too many people from the outside in. But yes, we've got the first tour since '83. We just thought, no, we want to do a club tour. We just want to go in there and sort of play the way we got our start here in Australia, which was playing the sweaty pubs. There will be two things that I'll be doing from now on with maybe the 5 or 6 years that I've got left. I'll be doing the AA band as often as I can. In between what the Tats do,
because the Whiskey a Go Go is it's an iconic venue for a start. It must be something you're really looking forward to. I wonder, have you played the Whiskey before? Have you, back in the '80s?
When we did the Whiskey, the Angels were over there trying to establish themselves in Los Angeles as a place to operate from. It never happened, but it's one of those quirky things. But they did a series of showcase gigs at the Whiskey, and I was sharing a house with 3 or 4 different other people, and one of them was Axel's younger brother, who worked with Axel and the Gunners in the early days as a roadie, and he said, "Oh, listen, the Angels are coming to town, and the boys in the band want to go and see them, and you know them, so you want to come along and have just have a night out with the boys," which the boys from the Guns N' Roses band, and who I just recently met, and so we went along, and there was this. There's a couple of very iconic photos taken at the time, and we got up. There's a great photo of Doc and I and Axel. We got up and did about 3 or 4 songs with the Angels, and they didn't know any Guns N' Roses songs. So I think we did things like Johnny Be Good, and I think we did Jumpin' Jack Flash. I think we did a couple of standards like that, but we did 2 or 3 Tats songs, which not only did the Angels know, but of course Guns N' Roses, because they covered a lot of our material in their early days.
And you've you've jumped up like many times. I've seen you on stage with Guns N' Roses here. It's almost like disappointing if you go to a Guns N' Roses show in Australia and there is no Angry Anderson at some point at the stage.
Yeah, well, the thing about it is because, and they're the first to acknowledge it. But the next time they come out to tour, do a concert tour, one of the first things they said was, "Well, will you get up at the end of the show?" And because we want to finish with Nice Boys like we always have. and will you get up and sing it with Axel? And I said, okay, yeah. So it's become now, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's become part of their show, but it's become part of the shows that they do here in Australia. Yeah.
I often play those first three albums, Rose Tattoo, Assault and Battery, and Scarred for Life. It was a very exciting time in Australian rock and roll, wasn't it? There was Albert Records that you were part of. Albert's at the time was AC/DC. Bond still would have been with AC/DC, at least when that first record came out. And of course, the Angels that you've been talking about there. Fascinating now that you have a Rose Tattoo lineup that includes Mark Evans, who was AC/DC on Albert's at the time. With the Angels in there, you've got Bob Spencer's association as well. It's like this lineup of Rose Tattoo has come full circle back to your early days.
It's a bit incestuous, isn't it? I think one of the things that there's a common thread there, obviously, is the Albert's connection, which we've all enjoyed, and we've all been part at one stage or another. We've all were part of the early, what they now refer to as the Albert's family, and they were very, we were all together. I remember when the first time I met Mark, and we've been great mates ever since. As with Bob, I think Bob was 17. I think he was still at school. He was playing in Finch. And Buster Brown was up in Sydney playing checkers, and they did a support for us. At that time, of course, Phil Rudd was in. Phil Rudd was playing drums with Buster, as Geordie Leach was playing bass. Back in Melbourne, around about the time where Buster, for whatever reasons, was hit some hard times, and AC/DC were, we were all hanging around in the Melbourne scene at that time, and AC/DC had hit rocky times. They, changed their singer for Bond. They changed their the bass player for Mark eventually, and they changed their drummer for Phil. But Phil went before Mark, so Phil joined the band. So we were still hanging around together, drinking together, hanging out. And then they got young Mark in, and so that's how I met Mark in those very, very early days. Not long after that, of course, Mick Cox, in 75, went to Sydney and spent some weeks just hanging around, meeting musos, and in an effort to, the purpose was to try and find some cats to, form a lineup, form a band. And a very colourful identity in Sydney at the time, who, God rest his soul, a guy known to a lot of people in the industry, a man of very colourful reputation, a guy called Ray Arnold. He said we were drinking, I think, at the Bondi Lifesaver. And he said, there's a bunch of guys that are looking for a singer. I think you'd fit the bill. And he introduced me to Pete and Ian. And they had a band, they had a lineup, and I went and had a jam with them, and Mick just tagged along, and so then we went back to Melbourne. Nothing came of it, and then we came back to Sydney some months later, and it was Ian Rylands. He said, you want to come around and have another jam? And so I went round, and they were down short a guitar player, so Mick stepped in. And the rest, as they say, is history. We formed the lineup that was to become Rose Tattoo. Yeah.
Mm. Well, yeah, as I was showing you before, the Buster Brown out.
Now, I know you're clever enough, but I didn't know this. You do know this. I know. I can tell by the smile on your face. I didn't realise. Isn't that funny? Like, I was given a copy of the re-release of Buster Brown. Mm. And I just left it in the box. But it's got bonus tracks on it. And one of them is Realise Legalise.
It absolutely is.
That's the original cut which was, as I said, it was a jam, but it was printed on about 50 copies. Because I remember I was given a couple of boxes of 20 copies each, because the guy who produced the session, who was a good friend of Lobby, said, look, there's nothing's going to happen, so you may as well have them. So I took them for, I suppose, a keepsake, really. But Gil somehow discovered the original tapes, or he lifted it off a single, because he and Lobby were very close through their whole lives. And when Gil started Aztec Records, the first album that he picked as the first album on this brand new label of his was Buster Brown.
Oh, there you go. So there we go. We've gone full circle from talking about your new record to right back to Buster Brown, the origins, and the same song. You know, the song that's out now is the one that ends off this bonus.
Well, as you say, see, there's a thread that goes through. There's not that much time left. I mean, I don't think there'd be 10 years in it. I really don't. Certainly not at my age. But like, gratefully, I don't think the Tats will go on without me. But the thing about it is, I think like there's maybe 4 or 5 years left that I've got to give. Because Tats demands, but requires a certain physicality, which is essential for the delivery of the songs. And so you have to be physically, let alone emotionally, fit and alert. And so I think there's 2 or 3 other players that I think I would love to work with in future days within the Tats framework. So that lineup may change in coming days too. But getting back to my band, this is the band I've been talking about doing my own thing since, as I said, since when I first joined Mushroom Records, and I had a band that was going to be the first AA band, and it became, after we did the first album, Beats from a Single Drum, Mushroom, in their doubtful wisdom, decided that they had to market the album as a Rose Tattoo album. So at that stage, I had one of the most gifted and wonderful guitar players in the world, Timmy Gaze, playing with us. We had Scotty Johnson playing drums, wonderful, wonderful drummer, and Andy Shishong, who, a beautiful bass player, who co-wrote Suddenly as a pianist. He's a classically trained pianist. He's been playing for about the last 30 years. He's the bass player for Billy Joel. He spent many, many years on and off in between tours with Billy, playing with Shania Twain. So a very gifted muso, and that was going to be the core of the first Angry Anderson band, but we never got to prove ourselves as a band because originally the market, once Suddenly was a big hit, I got to say that Mushroom changed their mind and said, well, yes, you can be a solo artist in your own right. So they renamed the album the Angry Anderson album, but that lineup, of course, went out to promote that album. But it was a confusing time for the punters because originally the album had been released as Rose Tattoo. But the next album, about 3 years later, of course, that was the period we were talking about where I went to live in Los Angeles. So the band that went out and toured that album was the Angry Anderson Band, which was Rob Riley from the Scarred for Life lineup. A Texan guitar player called Bobby Bass, who I became great mates with when I was over there. He came over. We had the very gifted Jimmy Hilden, who played bass with the Angels for years. He played bass, and Tim Powles, who's a wonderful drummer. I first saw him playing with the Divinals, and then later on with the Hunters, with Dragon. And we went out as the Angry Anderson Band, and that was the period of when we had Bound for Glory out as a hit song.
Right.
So there was one previous incarnation of the Angry Anderson Band, but not to last. And so we're back again for another try. But this time, like I said before, the music, the genre, if you like, or the flavour, the area of music that we're going to be concentrating on is that real Tamla Motown R&B blues. Quite. We're not going to limit ourselves in any way from the kind of music, which brings me to, if you'll permit me, a lot of the feedback, particularly from overseas, and here in Australia as well, in doing interviews, and everyone's remarked, they said, like, we love the new single because it's such a different direction for you as Angry Anderson. And I think, thank God for that, because I'm now old enough to be able to get away from being, the bad boy for love or whatever, the rose tattoo singer. Pardon me. And because it really has. And when I gave the song to Tim, I said, don't be influenced by anything. You listen to the song. You then put it away and you come up with a musical interpretation that tells the story, that sells the idea. And I explained to him that, we'd moved on from the legalisation of marijuana for personal use. It was now about reintroducing, and quite vitally and quite rightly, quite importantly, starting a conversation about the medicinal use of cannabis. The genus that is cannabis, in its variants, can be used in different ways medicinally, and it can, if it's allowed to by the powers that be. And this is the sticking point. What I'd like to create or help create, be part of getting this movement going, where people think, you know what? For too long, this natural medicine has been ignored. For thousands of years, up until less than 100 years ago, cannabis was used right around the world, imported in some cases, and used medicinally. And then all of a sudden, I think 80, 90 years ago, with vested interests behind, it was made an illegal drug.
From Buster Brown to now, we've covered the past 40 years. So thank you for your time today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure always.